There we go. We need to gather up everything we possibly can, every ray of light that we can, with a willing heart, surrender to the Lord to be a part of this and go out and have what is going to feed the feeble and the weak. And that was kind of touched on in that chapter too, with when we were looking at the bruised reed. Because there's people that are to be helped, and we have a responsibility to know what we need to know so that we can actually feed and help those that are hungry as well. So, sorry, it took me a minute to get here. So we're going to do Ipsus, which we've gone through before, but repetition is good for us all. I pray that it's a blessing for all of us. This one, just a heads up, because Christina likes to know sometimes. That's 42 slides, but I kind of spread them out. So although it's long, there's less on each one. So, but going back into Ipsus. So we've been looking at the four battles. We combined the lines of Pyrrhus, the two histories of Pyrrhus, and we saw 4 battles. So when you put the two histories together, Macedonia and Italy, you have Ipsus that was in during his Macedonian, lacking the words to say that portion of the slide because it's 2 histories. The history of Macedonia, you have Ipsus, and then in the history.
Oh, no.
Huh?
No, it's not in the history of Macedonia.
Ipsus isn't?
No.
Or is it?
It didn't happen in Macedonia, it happened in Turkey, remember? Ipsus.
Yeah, but it was during that part of that history. It was 301, right?
Yeah, Macedonia was later.
And 285 is where you go to the switch. So it was part of that history, right?
No.
301 BC, right?
The west and the east.
That was a
That's
totally
when he
different
first
thing.
comes on the scene.
Pyrrhus, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, sorry.
But
it's not part of his Italy campaign is what I was trying to get at, but sorry.
Oh,
Thank you for clarifying that.
So Pyrrhus was Demetrius's general, but that's when Antigonus was alive.
Right.
So that was the end of the 4th Diadochi War. So Ipsus is the 4th Diadochi War end.
Right.
And then Macedonia is just Demetrius and Pyrrhus against each other over in Macedonia.
So yeah, wrong way of saying it. I was just trying to say that it's part of the other history, not part of Italy. And because Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum are the battles in Italy. Okay. So what are these in the history of World War II? These same battles, what are they? So we'll start with an easier question. 2 of these battles are identified in Daniel 11 between Seleucus and Ptolemy. Those battles are Raphia and Panium, and we place them at Asculum and Beneventum. So this is Raphia and Panium, and on the line of Pyrrhus, it's Asculum and Beneventum. So we have Raphia and under Asculum and Panium under Beneventum. In the history of Pyrrhus, what decided the victor of Ipsus?
The elephant.
The elephants. In each battle, Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum is decided by the same mode of warfare. Elephants decided Ipsus. They decided each battle. They decided Beneventum. We described a little bit about that dynamic. That is the theme or the story that Pyrrhus gives us about these battles. So the Battle of Ipsus, Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum, the elephants are what decided the battle. And Asculum and Beneventum line up with Raphia and Panium. So when we come into the history of World War II, what would we place over this history? So we're going to have a line here of World War II with the line of Pyrrhus, where we use the 4 battles. Now it's not talking about battles. Now what it wants to speak about is invasions. And what was Ipsus? And Ipsus on the World War II line is the invasion of Poland. And if we talk about World War II, it begins at Ipsus and it continues through. And this is as much the part of a war as is the war between the Soviet Union and Germany. And this is the war on the Western Front and the invasion of Poland. So Ipsus begins war on the Western Front with the invasion of Poland.
Wait, where does World War I start again?
We're not doing World War I.
I know, but isn't it? Where would it stand?
What do you mean?
Because you have World War II at Ipsus. I can't.
I'm not up to speed on World War One just yet.
Diadochi War 3.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Remember?
yeah. Okay, got it.
And then Diadochi War 4 is Ipsus, and so you have World
Okay.
War 2.
Okay. So we marked Heraclea. I didn't want to give you a wrong answer.
That's okay.
I know bits and
I was
pieces
just
of it, but
like-
I'm still.
Yeah, me too.
So we marked Heraclea, and actually I really like that study because I'm better understanding. I've been going through it during the week, but not to this level where it sticks, but understanding the role of Seleucus more, because Seleucus comes back and he's going to take Babylon, right? So we marked Heraclea as August 1940. So we've got the invasion of Poland lining up with Ipsus, beginning of war on the Western Front. Then with Heraclea is August 1940. And we want to describe a little bit about what that looks like. And then we have Asculum, beginning of the Eastern Front. So here's Asculum, and we call it from Daniel 11 Raphia. That's beginning of war on the Eastern Front. If we've passed Raphia, remember that this presentation was done in, I think it was March of 2019. So obviously before November. So we've passed this. So we're in war on the Eastern Front. So then Asculum beginning the Eastern Front with Operation Barbarossa. And now we have the King of the South and the King of the North against the King of the North. So we can see, because we know that they were in alliance, I think we're going to I'll just read the notes because I'll go off and say what it already says here. So, so we can see that their warfare doesn't really start until Raphia. And what Pyrrhus gives us and World War II gives us is a history that leads up to that war. But the history that leads up to that war tells us what that is going to look like. So the history tells us what this war is going to look like. Because of this first battle, Ipsus, you have the King of the North and the King of the South fighting as allies. So they're allies here at Ipsus because they went into an alliance before Ipsus back here in 2014. We'll call it the Pact or the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact when you were in World War II. So in both histories, it begins with an alliance. And if we were to talk about application, we found this to be 2014. There is an agreement. Ipsus is 2016, then Heraclea is 2018, Asculum is 2019, and Beneventum is 2021. So you have this alliance in 2014 that leads up to them fighting as allies on the same side in Ipsus. But all of this leads up to this battle here in War on the Eastern Front. So to understand what these battles look like, we go to these battles to tell us. So we have this lead up from 2014. It gives us this history that leads to this war, which does not truly begin until the Battle of Raphia. But the first battle as allies, Ipsus, and the first argument between the King of the North and the King of the South is Heraclea. They show us what Raphia and Panium will look like because it's the same mode of warfare. And whether they were fighting as allies or as enemies, they're using the same techniques. And when they turn on each other, they're going to do the same thing, use the same techniques that they did in the history that leads up to it. So we saw that there was a problem here at Heraclea where the relationship was breaking down. In our last study, we talked about 2014, and we didn't begin here. We connected our thread from 1989. We spoke about why we needed to do that, 1989 to 1991. In this increase of knowledge, it gives us information about what methods have been developing that lead to these battles. We discussed the World Wide Web, the Internet's Big Bang, and as Trump put it, the rise of the Internet is the same time of the rise of the United States as the world's only superpower. That is the history of 1989 to 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union. And we're going to discuss that more the next time, what that actually looks like. So we saw the King of the South fall, but we know by 2014 he's back on the scene. So we have the King of the South here. He receives a deadly wound and then he dies as the USSR, but now he's back on the scene. And we're looking at Russia now. And let's see, back on the scene, and to be going into an alliance, he has to have already come back in this picture. So 2014, he's ready for an alliance with the King of the North, and that is part of a strategy. They start off as allies, even though behind each other's backs, they know the other side is the enemy. First, the invasion of Poland. It's like we're playing this big game of pride with two leaders. And the people all are pawns in the whole game. The first invasion of Poland, war on the West, this suits both of them. To attack the West suits Donald Trump as much as it would suit Vladimir Putin. So in this, they are together. So when he attacks the West, talking about the three branches of government, and it suits them both. Their relationship deteriorates in August 1940, as well as we saw in Heraclea.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
It's like, it's a whole new parable. It just came to my mind of what Donald Trump is, what we're seeing now with Donald Trump with the impeachment and everything. Because, when we were in Raffia, prior to Raffia and the whole battle with Russia and, the United States and Putin and Donald Trump, it's like with this whole impeachment thing, it just took Russia out of the picture for a moment,
right.
And the focus just went on Donald Trump and his behavior and the exposure, to the American people and how they react to it. So it's like it's a whole different dynamic of a parable to what we're witnessing in this story, you know. It's really interesting. But of course, that whole Putin thing is going to come back because that chapter has to, get cut off to where Donald Trump becomes, United States becomes a overall superpower and stuff like that. But it seems as if Putin has been just brushed to the side a little bit.
He's over there boasting his great winds of spheres of influence, right?
Well, during Raffia, Putin was there because last year during the impeachment trial, while it was in the House, in the Congress, not in the Senate, everything that was happening, Trump kept losing and losing. The witnesses kept showing his nonsense. It was like, you can see Trump losing. You can see King of the North losing.
Putin was sticking up for him, if I remember.
And no, everyone was tying to, look how Russia is winning from this. Look how Russia is winning from what he did to Ukraine. And Russia was constantly there. The minute they voted on articles and then the year turned around, now Trump is winning. Everything, Senate, everything. He's winning everything. It totally flipped after Raffia.
Yeah, but I see that, but then Russia is not in the picture right now.
Because it's not Raffia anymore. Yeah.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. So it's like really interesting.
But now it's more on the Eastern Front.
Yeah.
So.
It's really interesting kind of seeing that whole parable,
yeah.
play right before your very eyes. Like, whoa.
So first, the invasion of Poland, war on the West. This suits them both. Okay, their relationship deteriorates in August 1940. Their alliance breaks down, and we're going to discuss why. It's temporarily repaired until we come to the history of 1941, or Asculum, which is also Raffia, where both sides are prepared for war. And now it's open war between the King of the North and the King of the South. And we have the two battles of Raffia and Panium. In the history of World War II, which is less restricted by the ancient modes of warfare, it's not battles, but invasions. It gives us an extra layer to consider because an invasion is not the same thing as a battle. First, Germany invades the Soviet Union in 1941, or Raffia, and then the Soviet Union invades Germany in 1945, Panium. We also need to juggle the concepts of success and failure. This dynamic of success and failure we see in the battles where they're facing each other or fighting each other, which means that we then went to these histories and we switched the aggressor and the victor in Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum. So yeah, Heraclea is August 1940, Asculum 1941, and Beneventum 1945. So we see with the difference between a line of success and a line of failure. So in World War II, it was a line of failure here, and it's reversed in our history. So the battles are reversed, and the winner the victor is reversed. So to remind us, there are 4 lines. We've got 3 histories. The first one is Pyrrhus in Macedonia. So of the 4 lines, you have the 2 histories of Pyrrhus, and then you have the history of World War II, and then you have our history. So the first one was Pyrrhus in Macedonia. While it can also teach us, I want to keep these 2 models of the Pyrrhic War and World War II to discuss the battles of Ipsus and Heraclea. But Heraclea is Pyrrhus's history in Italy, which means it's a history of success. So when we look at Heraclea, Asculum and Beneventum, what are we discussing? It was a line of success. So you see Heraclea, Asculum, and Beneventum, it's a line of success. And we see that in the, this would be the alpha and this would be the omega. So in omega history, it's a line of success. And the omega meaning that you had, this is his period in Italy, where the Macedonia was his alpha. So when we come to the history of World War II, what history is this? When we talked about August 1940, 1941-45, is it success or failure? And that's this line over here. That will become important. It's a failure, and that will become important when we discuss August of 1940. When we look at the dynamics of August 1940, we need to make a change between the aggressor and the victor. At August 1940, the aggressor was the king of the South, who came against the king of the North. So Russia came against Germany. The victor was Germany. So you know, in our history, back in the alpha, the omega of this history has to show the king of the North coming against the king of the South. And it has to be a victory for the king of the South. This is what we need to see in 2018. So 2018, Heraclea had to be the king of the North, Donald Trump, coming against the king of the South, Russia. And the victory was for Russia, which Adriana just was talking about, that he had all these wins. So before we get to 2018, we'll start with...
Because he did Syria too.
Yeah.
He did Syria too. So it was Ukraine and Syria, Russia won.
Right. And there was all kinds of things in the news talking about he had so many wins he didn't know how he could handle them. It was talking about him not having the money to support the wins that he had. There's a lot of stuff about that. But now, isn't it this time where he's back, this is verse 12, where he's back boasting, and he goes and desecrates the temple, right? Anybody have any understanding on that? Isn't that what this verse is?
Yeah, the king of the South does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
So before we get to 2018, we'll start with Ipsus. This is the first battle they go into as allies. We want to look at this battle from 2 perspectives, and we began to consider that from the last study. You may not have noticed the thought introduced, but we talked about Daniel 11:4 and Daniel 8:8. Both of those are telling the story of where Alexander's empire goes from 1 king to 4. It's divided into 4 at the Battle of Ipsus. So the story of Ipsus is in that verse, even though it's not named. Daniel 11:4 and Daniel 8:8, they talk about the death of Alexander and the division into 4, and that happened at the Battle of Ipsus. So when we approached Ipsus, we came at it from the direction of Pyrrhus, and it's Pyrrhus's history that we were considering. We were considering Pyrrhus and his alliance or relationship with Demetrius. That's the first aspect that we want to consider, the first direction or perspective. So Ipsus isn't mentioned in the verse, but it's the Battle of Ipsus that brings them from Alexander's death to the 4 generals. So when we consider the Battle of Ipsus from that perspective, we find that it's a war between our generals who are in alliance. Those generals being Seleucus, Ptolemy, Cassander, and Lysimachus. These 4 generals, our famous generals, are allies, and they have united in an alliance years before because they have all one common threat, and unless they combine all their strength, they're unable to defend themselves against him. And this great threat was the general Antigonus, the most powerful general after Alexander. So you have Antigonus here at the Battle of Ipsus, and you have your 4 allies, but you're going to see that only 3 of them are on the scene for this battle. We discussed the 4 Diadochi Wars. Is somebody monitoring the chat just in case anybody has questions?
Yeah,
I have mine on if you want to.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Okay, good. I can actually turn mine off probably since you're there now. Hang on one second, guys.
No one's put anything in the chat.
Okay, if you do have questions, speak up or put it in the chat and somebody will watch it.
Everyone's just talking about how everything confirms prophecy.
Yeah, but that was prior to. That was in the Sabbath school.
Yeah, I think so.
He placed Guaido at the State of the Union address.
Guaido? Who's Guaido?
That was the Venezuela.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, okay.
that's.
I tell you, I'm
Trump's-
bad with when it comes to
the other guy.
Okay.
I wrote that, but I thought it's a spheres of influence because he presented him right there, in front of everyone at the State of the Union. He rose and bowed and.
Oh,
whatever.
that's right. That's right. I remember that.
And that's USA, and the other guy, Gordo, or Madero.
Madero
he
is the
Russia. He's
yeah.
for Russia. And so there's 2 presidents in Venezuela, and they're fighting for position in there right now. Who's going to be the president, the one and only?
Yeah.
So that's a sphere of influence that Russia's going to have to lose.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia's going to lose that. Guaido's going to be the president of Venezuela. He's going to be accepted everywhere. Everywhere where their spheres of influence are, it's all going to collapse.
That's right.
Yeah, that's already a known one because everybody wants him to be president. The guy, the U.S. one.
I need to be more up on that in India as well.
What's going on in India?
Yeah, there's nothing.
What's his name? Modi?
Yeah, he's with US. That's it.
Yeah.
Modi, his problem is he is persecuting
Islam.
the Muslims,
And everybody needs to
the
be Hindu.
Uyghur population.
And everybody needs to be Hindu, I think is what
They have kill squads that go and kill Muslims that they suspect have eaten cow meat or
That
something.
is crazy.
So they're doing the same thing, only different religion wise, persecuting one over the other.
But that's crazy because usually you would think that's the Muslims doing that, with the jihads. But that's interesting to me.
It just shows what's really in everyone's heart. It's not that we care about terrorists. No, you just want to hurt people that don't agree with you.
I know that's messed up. And then they put that over religion, that that they have these jihad, Muslims call jihad wars, to get people to embrace the religion, like Islam and all these different things. And it's just really crazy that they put religion as a justification for these wars to get people on their side.
So we discussed the 4 Diadochi Wars, and through those wars, particularly the 3rd and the 4th, at the end of the 2nd, Antigonus had become so powerful that he was named Master of Asia. So at the end of the 2nd, he's named Master of Asia. He had made himself a king through his victories, not only himself, we also find his son Demetrius, who was also fighting in this battle. So in the 2nd Diadochi War, because we have 4 towards the end of the 2nd, Demetrius defeated a powerful general, which gave him much more control over the empire. And he became so powerful at the end of the 2nd that at the beginning of this 3rd war, what began the 3rd war was these generals going into an alliance against him, and they fought 2 wars. The Battle of Ipsus ended the 4th. So after the 2nd, Antigonus is named Master of Asia, and then it's after 4, the Battle of Ipsus here, when we go down to the 4 generals, when Antigonus is killed. Near the location of Ipsus, these generals met each other. And I have a map coming up of Ipsus as well, and somebody help me out when we get there, if it's actually Turkey, because I know that's what Adriana said, because it looked like, I was going to ask, it looks like part of Greece, and I didn't know. So I was trying to search that out and find it out. So help me out when we get to that map. So near the location of Ipsus, these generals met each other. First of all, It was just Cassander and Lysimachus who were facing Antigonus, but at the last moment, Seleucus arrived unexpectedly. So in this battle, you have Cassander, Lysimachus, and Seleucus. And I thought it was interesting that, because Seleucus comes from the east, that he wasn't there initially. Between the third and the fourth war, Seleucus had established his empire, and he had gone east. And he returned just in time for this battle. He heard reports that there was going to be a battle, and that this alliance was ready to destroy Antigonus. So he returned from his eastern campaigns just in time for the battle, as the battle was starting. Ptolemy was down south of Ipsus. He was besieging a city, and that city was Sidon, which we've already spoke about in Acts 27. Ptolemy had not yet arrived at the scene of battle when he hears a report that says that the battle has been lost. Antigonus won. Ptolemy thinks that these three allies have been destroyed, so he flees back to Egypt, knowing that he needs to prepare himself to protect his country. That was a false report. The battle hadn't even begun. Ptolemy had a bad habit in running away from battles. Ptolemy doesn't turn up, whether or not he ran away or he really heard a report. That was a trend he continued through the wars. So when it came to Ipsus, it was three allies. They were known as the allied forces of Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus fighting against Antigonus and his son Demetrius. Both were managing separate armies. Demetrius had a portion of army and Antigonus had a portion of army. So they both had their own and going to battle together. Demetrius has a general as an ally. This ally is not an ally of Antigonus, but an ally of Demetrius. And that ally was Pyrrhus, fighting as his general. We see in this battle that Antigonus was defeated. When Seleucus returned from his eastern campaign between the third and the fourth wars, he came with a massive army of elephants, around 400 or so, 400 to 500 elephants. As Antigonus charged, the distance between Antigonus and Demetrius became greater and greater until Seleucus saw an opportunity and he drove his elephants between their two armies. And when he created this division, he was able to direct his forces against Antigonus. He waged war with just half of the army until Antigonus died fighting. Antigonus, by this stage, was over 80 years old. He still fought to the death. So Antigonus is killed and Demetrius flees from the battle. But let's start to consider this perspective, knowing that we are going to make it another. So there are two perspectives of Ipsus. So you have two kings, Antigonus and Demetrius, but Demetrius is controlled by his father. You have three allies, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus, facing both Antigonus and Demetrius. So you've got the three allies here, and they're facing Antigonus and Demetrius. Pyrrhus is supporting Demetrius, and at the Battle of Ipsus, Antigonus dies. And that's the Fourth Diadochi War. If we were to talk about the 2016 election, consider this perspective. You have two people fighting against an alliance. The name of Antigonus means compared to or like the ancestor, and compared the ancestor, singular, in comparison to the ancestors. So if we discussed his name, it means like in comparison to the ancestor, equal to the ancestor. In the history of Greece, who would that ancestor be? In history of Greece, the ancestor of Antigonus would be Alexander the Great. So Antigonus, the name means like the ancestor. So he's like Alexander the Great. We already discussed that the structure Daniel gives us to verse 4 of chapter 11. When he, under inspiration, composed that verse, he's content to skip 22 years and go straight to the Battle of Ipsus, where there is the division into four, and he skips 4 wars, goes to the end of the fourth, which is Ipsus. So Daniel goes from the death of Alexander and skips these 4 wars, these 4 Diadochi wars, and goes to the death of Antigonus, where you now have the 4 generals. Well,
yeah. Another reason he does that is because Antigonus is just Alexander.
Right.
It's the same thing.
Right.
So it's just a continuation of Alexander. So he goes
until he's dead. So what we discussed when we drew this thought of why you could build this structure, and the thought that we considered was that he is going from cause to effect, and he has the prophetic license to see these wars as noise, as insignificant to the parable he wants to create, because the death of Alexander doesn't cause an effect until the death of Antigonus. This is where the empire is truly divided. Antigonus was just like Alexander. We find that embedded in his name and also in the work he's doing. The last of the unifiers of the empire. So it's not truly divided, not at the death of Alexander, but at the death of Antigonus. I would suggest that's why Daniel can go straight from the death of Alexander to the four.
Wait, can we say that the last of the unifiers of the empire?
It says basically the same thing she said.
I know.
That Antigonus is just representing Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not until here, he goes from the death of Alexander, but it's not really done until you destroy Antigonus, who's doing the same work as Alexander.
Right, but my focus was on that's why Daniel can go straight from the death of Alexander to the four.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
why.
Mhm.
Right. The death of Alexander is the cause, and the division is the effect. You don't see the results until the death of Antigonus. You can make the argument that these are the same persons, Alexander and Antigonus. Then we come to Demetrius. He's a separate character. We've already identified him in that history. He's the king of the north at Raphia and Panium. So we know who Demetrius represents. Demetrius represents Trump. We find Trump's role also embedded in his name. And what does Trump's name mean? I didn't put it in here. Donald Trump. Donald means ruler of the world, right? So Demetrius represents Trump here. Then Demetrius, we find also the role, okay, and then in the name Demetrius' role, his name comes from the goddess Demeter. Demeter was the Greek goddess of corn and harvest. So Demetrius' name tells us of harvest. And at Donald Trump's election, we find the harvest of the United States becomes inevitable. He's the one that leads the world into harvest, because without him, there would be no Raphia in Panium. There would be no Sunday law. It's Trump that leads the world into harvest. And we know that from, what line is it when you go to Argos? That's after Pyrrhus's death, right? And Sunday law is Argos, because it means harvest. White with the harvest. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the Italy history.
Yes. When we come to the 2016 election, or Ipsus, we find two people opposing three allies. The three allies in the history of Ipsus was Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus. Demetrius is Donald Trump. Who is Antigonus? We have in that battle, you have the election taking place, and it's Donald Trump against Clinton. So Donald Trump is Demetrius, and Antigonus is Clinton. When you came to that election, were they fighting each other? No. Did Clinton want Trump Tower? Did she want his wealth, his job, or his title? No. He has nothing that she wants. Clinton has nothing that Trump wants. He doesn't want her houses or her wealth. There's nothing she has that he wants. They're fighting for something separate to themselves. What they both want are the three branches of the US government. There is the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. So the three branches of the US government is what they want. And that is what these two people want in the 2016 election. So you have in the Battle of Ipsus, Antigonus, Demetrius, supported by Pyrrhus against the three allies. In 2016, you have Clinton against Trump, and Trump is supported by, we know that's Putin, against these three allies. So when we talk about Clinton, who does she stand with? Who is she? She's like the ancestor. And who is the ancestor? So when you're lining these things all up, who is the ancestor? You have George Washington. You could go back to the beginning of American history, talk about 1798. You could go through this history of America as a lamb like beast. You can talk about George Washington, the founders of the Constitution. You could step through this history, talk about Roosevelt, come down here under Ipsus and the death of Antigonus, talk about Obama and what is Donald Trump's argument against Hillary Clinton. He says she's part of the establishment. And the people should have said, yes, we want the establishment. We want the history of the United States from 1798 through Obama. Donald Trump's other argument, you're going to have another Obama in the White House. The people should have been content with another constitutional lawyer. But for various reasons, we've discussed a couple, people are turned against the establishment and they voted in the same person who's going to lead that country to harvest, to its destruction, both on when we consider the people and when we discuss the institutions in Acts 27. They also shut their door. So you have the death of Alexander being the cause of coming to Ipsus, where the effect is the final death of Alexander through Antigonus, because he's like the father. So no longer is anyone fighting as Alexander did to unite. And now you have these 4 generals in division. So the death of Alexander was the cause, and then the death of Antigonus is the effect. You have George Washington, who is the establishment, representing the establishment, being the cause, and then you come down here to this history of Obama, and then you have Trump.
So Trump is the effect?
Of the death of it's when you have the death
of
the establishment.
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because Antigonus is the effect of Alexander, but he was,
it was his death.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay.
So the death of Clinton.
Yeah.
The death of Clinton is the effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's she represents the establishment.
Right.
George Washington is the beginning of the establishment, and then you have Clinton at the election. Clinton loses, and it's the death of the establishment.
Right. I get that. I was just wondering how come Clinton is not there and you have Trump instead there.
Because that's where Trump won.
Well.
But yeah. It's not the death of. I didn't put the death of Clinton there. The death of the establishment. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So so it's representing the same thing as going down to those 4 generals. You're going down to it's the death of Alexander and the uniting of the kingdom. Antigonus trying to unite the kingdom. So
starting to click in my head. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that Demetrius was known to be a really crazy, violent, rough guy. Like he didn't have any kind of like standards or ethics. He was just like, I'm going to do whatever I want. And he had his own agenda. So he certainly wasn't going to try to do what his father did and unite the kingdom. He just was bad. If you look at him and his character.
Perfect.
Matches
perfect. So when we bring this to the 2016 election, we find the story of 2 people, Clinton and Trump. Antigonus went into this battle wounded. In previous battles he fought back in his past history, he had suffered an accident. So when he was born and when he began fighting for Alexander, he had been born with 2 eyes, as you would expect, 2 fully functioning eyes. In a previous battle, an arrow had struck one of his eyes and he was blinded. And when he comes to Ipsus with just 1 eye, which is why he was known as Antigonus the One-Eyed, it had become part of his name, Antigonus the One-Eyed. In the Battle of Ipsus, he loses the 2nd eye. I don't want to discuss eyes, I want to go to the language of Revelation. We're discussing the lamb-like beast. That lamb-like beast begins its conquest, rises up with 2 horns. By the time you get to 2016, in a conflict long ago, what had happened to one of its horns? It was broken. Do you have a date for that? So in 1844, the Republican horn was broken. With the election of Donald Trump, you can see the breaking of the Republican horn.
Did someone want to say something?
Wasn't it the Protestant horn that was broken in 1844?
Yeah.
Did I say it backwards?
Yeah, you said Republican.
Okay, sorry. I said it backwards, my bad. So yes, the Protestant horn was broken in 1844, and the Republican horn is broken at Ipsus. With the election of Donald Trump, you can see the breaking of the Republican horn. They chose a leader not the leader who stood with their 200 plus years of history, but a new leader already showing himself as a dictator. You know, when you read that passage that I read earlier from Patriarchs and Prophets, yeah, he was showing himself as a dictator for a very long time. For those that would see it, God was trying to show us, and now he's going to pour out evidence of in mercy. He's going to pour out that evidence in mercy for anybody that still would see it. So in 1844, the lamb-like beast suffered the breaking of its first horn, Protestantism. This is its religious element, separate and distinct with the state and republicanism. The systems of government. That horn is broken in the 2016 election, when they elect Donald Trump. Neither Clinton nor Trump are fighting each other. They're fighting for something separate to themselves, the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. So at 2016, then you have both horns now broken, and the death of the establishment and the rise of a dictator. If we were to bring this into World War II, it becomes the story of Poland, France, and Britain, a triple alliance. A triple alliance with Seleucus, Cassander, Lysimachus, a triple alliance with the three branches of government, executive, judicial, legislative, and judicial. 2016 is the invasion of Poland, and what happens to Poland? Adolf Hitler is taking on all three, but very quickly he takes one. Poland is wiped out. Then it's an ongoing war on the Western Front and with France and Britain.
Whoa! So Donald Trump took out the executive branch,
Right.
And so then it's an ongoing war with the judicial
And the
the
executive.
and the Congress. Yeah.
Right.
No, not executive, legislative. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, legislative and the judicial.
Making the wrong
branch.
words a lot. A lot to remember. So in Ipsus, you have three allies. World War II, you have three allies, Poland, France, and Britain. And in 2016, you have three allies, the executive, legislative, judicial. World War II shows us that Hitler very quickly takes Poland, and then it's ongoing with France and Britain. And we see in 2016, he very quickly takes the executive branch, and it's ongoing.
So now he's getting, he's got the judicial branch. He doesn't have Congress, but he's going to get Congress through the
He's got half
papacy.
of Congress.
He's going to get.
Yeah, he's got half of Congress.
He's got half.
Oh yeah,
And
the
it's a little
Senate.
less than
yeah,
that.
Senate. Yeah, Senate. But you still have the House. But I think that he might get them through the papacy. I only say that because there's no way that you're going to see the House. I don't care what Trump does. The House is not fearful of him, and they don't respect him. The only way that they're going to he's going to have his way with them is through the papacy. That's what I see, but I could be wrong. I can be wrong.
I can't comment. I don't know.
I don't know, but I'm just thinking. That's what comes to my mind.
Is Pelosi Catholic?
Yeah, she is.
Yeah,
And that's what I was referring to, but I don't know. That's why.
interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about that. I just see the Democrats as losing in 2020 and him having control of all three.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Because he can get away with what he wants, then therefore he has.
Is there anything on the lines that shows that he will still not have control of the House in 2020?
Well, Sister Christine says that
Why
he
would
might
he?
get the House through elections.
What?
He might get the House through elections.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Or he might lose it. So I don't know, but World War II, Hitler was never able to defeat France and England. Because you had England,
Britain. Yeah.
Britain, England, and Poland, France and Poland. Hitler only ever got Poland. He fought these two, but he never won them.
So he may not get control of the House
No,
in 2020.
but he has.
But he does have the judicial
He does have
branch,
the. Yeah, I
though.
was thinking that too.
That's what I'm saying. He does have the judicial branch, though. He already has that. And if he
Because
keeps
this is a
firing
history
people,
of success.
Right.
yeah, and
Yeah.
if he keeps firing people, he can't fire anyone in the house. But I'm just saying, but
Yeah, it's possible he will get all three because this is a history of success.
So when it comes to 2016 election, it's facing the three branches of the US government, and quickly Adolf Hitler, supported by Stalin, takes the executive branch, or Poland. Donald Trump took the executive branch in 2016. Now he faces an ongoing war with the judicial and the legislative, and that is the war going on in the United States now. Poland was taken quickly. The executive branch, which is the presidency, was taken quickly. Now there's ongoing war with the judicial and the legislative.
Did you already pass the map?
No,
Okay.
I don't remember where it's at.
Well, okay. Well, Sister Christine says the executive office can do whatever they want. And to some degree, yeah, when you're not following the Constitution, when the Constitution just becomes a piece of paper and not law. And that's why they constantly say that you're not, that Trump is not above the law. That the Constitution is there to show you your responsibility and what you can do and what you cannot do when you're in office. And what the Constitution or the Republic that we have, it was supposed to, that if we saw someone being a tyrant or trying to get away with scandal or doing things above the law, then we had every right to voice in, what's the word I want to say? Protest. There's a better word than protest, but go against that, and vote that person out of office, which is impeachment. But obviously we see that, there's loopholes within the impeachment process. So, and so to some extent, yes, at this point, he does have the power to kind of do whatever he wants. But when it comes down to really what his role is and what his responsibility is, he does not have that. He shouldn't have that power to do that.
I have a few quotes that I found last night that I came across in some of the stuff that I was looking at. And they're Daniel Webster. Some of you guys probably know the names. Okay, Daniel Webster. I apprehended no danger to our country. And you know where I came across these, Sister Christine? They're in because originally I bought that little pocketbook Constitution, and it's the same one. I was looking at it. It's the same exact one that you bought, all those ones that we have. And it was in the beginning, first couple of pages, there were several quotes by different, by Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. So this was Daniel Webster. I apprehend no danger to our country from a foreign foe. Our destruction, should it come at all, will be from another quarter, from the inattention of the people to the concerns of their government, from their carelessness and negligence. I must confess that I do apprehend some danger. I fear that they may place too implicit a confidence in their public servants and fail properly to scrutinize their conduct, that it is this way they may be made the dupes of designing men and become the instruments of their own undoing. Make them intelligent and they will be vigilant. Give them the means of detecting the wrong and they will apply the remedy. And then there was another one. Hold on, my friends, to the Constitution and to the Republic for which it stands. Miracles do not cluster, and what has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again. Hold on to the Constitution, for if the American Constitution should fail, there will be anarchy throughout the world.
Yeah, it is.
And the last one was, I regard the Constitution as the work of the purest patriots and wisest statesmen that ever existed, aided by the smiles of a benign providence. It almost appears a divine interposition in our behalf. The hand that destroys our Constitution rends our union asunder forever.
Yeah, because it was the first time any constitution like that existed, and they said, this is God-led. If this fails, the whole world is going to be like, well, now we know that it can never exist anything like that.
Right.
Anarchy everywhere.
And then the one from Thomas Jefferson that I posted, all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. There was more to that one, but that was all that I got.
I
posted.
missed.
That's the Senate.
I know. Exactly.
Yep.
I miss the founding fathers because I mean I say it as if I was there. But anyway,
It's like missing Alexander.
Exactly.
Yeah. The
When
establishment.
when you go back and you look in history and you see what they're doing, like as I'm going through those studies and lessons, it's just remarkable. And I come to admire what they've done and what and then just to see where I'm living now in the place where that all that they built up and tried to create is being torn down and broken, it's just man, it makes me sad, it's
Yeah.
like
We're living at the end of the United States and the world.
And it's just really kind of
And to think that it was divine providence that gave us this opportunity. And as man would have it, we destroy every opportunity he gives us. So this is one perspective of Ipsus, the one that we just looked at. Go ahead.
Sister Jackie says, so wow. So what about Trump's EP to sign whatever he wants?
Executive power, is that what she means? Executive privilege?
Oh, okay,
Executive privilege?
Not executive power. I think it is power. Executive
Privilege.
power or privilege, but it's okay. To sign whatever he wants. But she's responding to Sister Christine. What is she saying? Sister Christine says the Constitution is being trampled upon.
So the one perspective, as we just went through it, was with Antigonus and Demetrius. Demetrius is backed by Pyrrhus. You have Antigonus representing the establishment, the fathers, like the fathers. You have Clinton representing the establishment, and they're not fighting each other. They're fighting with each other. Each are fighting for the three branches of government. So that was one perspective. So we're going to look at another one. Since Daniel 11:4 and 8:8, if we just turn to Daniel 11:4, and we'll let you read it. If somebody wants to read it. 11:4 and 5.
And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. And 5.
Mm-hmm.
And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him and have dominion. His dominion shall be a great dominion.
And then verse 8, Daniel 8:8. I just threw it in there. For more focus is going to be on 4.
Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones toward the 4 winds of heaven.
So verse 4, Daniel 11:4 and Daniel 8:8 are for you have the death of Alexander, and then you transition from the death of Alexander and you go to the 4 kings. So that's that 22-year period of history that Daniel skips over. Then in verse 5, you have the king of the south shall be strong and one of his princes. So now you have 2. So you go from 4 then to 2. This, we won't read all this. This is just Wikipedia information, and it's in the slide if anybody wants to, but it's just a little information on Seleucus and the Ptolemaic, is that how you say it? Ptolemaic dynasty.
Yeah,
Ptolemaic. Well, maybe we will, because it does have some good information in here. Because Seleucus served as an officer of Alexander the Great, commanding the elite infantry corps, because I didn't know this, in the Macedonian army, the shield bearers, later known as the silver shields. So Seleucus came out of the silver shields. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
Me either.
After the death of Alexander in 323, the partition of Tripodisus assigned Seleucus as satrap of Babylon in 321 BC. Antigonus, the satrap of much of Asia Minor, forced Seleucus to flee from Babylon, but supported by Ptolemy, the satrap of Egypt, Seleucus returned in 312 BC. Seleucus' later conquests included Persia and Media. He formed an alliance with the Indian king. I'll leave that one.
Where is it?
Chandragupta.
Oh yeah, Chandler. I remember that.
Seleucus defeated Antigonus in the Battle of Ipsus in 301 BC, and Lysimachus, king of Thrace, Macedon, and Asia Minor, in the Battle of Corruptium near Sardis in 281 BC. So Ptolemy Cyrannus assassinated Seleucus later in the same year. Seleucus' eldest son, Antiochus, succeeded him as ruler of the Seleucid territories. So this is the first Seleucus and the first Ptolemy. So Ptolemy, sometimes also known as Lagids or Lagide, Ptolemy I's father was a Macedonian Greek royal family. So they came out of Greece, which ruled because they all came out of Alexander's kingdom, which ruled the Ptolemaic kingdom in Egypt during the Hellenistic period. Their rule lasted for 275 years, from 305 to 30 BC. They were the last dynasty of ancient Egypt. Ptolemy, one of the 7 bodyguards. Go ahead.
So, Sister Adriana, that was when they're saying that they came out of Greek, but that was those little what do you call it? Because they were in Italy, they had that Greece population, or not Greece population, but
The city-states.
Yeah, the city-states, and so they came out of there, so they were still like Grecian and yeah.
Well, they all came from Alexander. They were Alexander's generals, and they all went to particular places.
Mm-hmm.
And Ptolemy went to Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
but they were all from Greece.
But yeah, from Greece.
They were all from Greece.
It's not. Where are you saying that he came from? The Italy Greek city-state.
She said.
Well,
she
no,
started like that.
I'm wondering.
No, it
No.
says Macedonian Greek, so he was part of the northern and southern. North is Macedonia, south is Greece, of that little.
But who came out of those city-states? Someone did, didn't they? No, none of the generals came out from there.
No, they're.
No, because they weren't even in Italy at the time. Because
No.
when Pyrrhus goes, that's what Pyrrhus is
That's what I'm
wanting to
thinking
do.
about. Pyrrhus. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Pyrrhus.
Pyrrhus didn't
Okay.
come from there either.
Okay.
He went there.
But he didn't.
No one we know came from there.
Italy was its own little
Mhm.
thing that came out of
Greece
nothing and
Greece
rose up.
colonized it, like
Mhm.
Because that's why
Brit-
they were in the whole lower half, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Pyrrhus and that. Thing. Okay.
So let's see. One of the 7 bodyguards of Macedon who served as Alexander the Great's generals and deputies was appointed satrap of Egypt after Alexander's death in 323 BC. In 305 BC, he declared himself Ptolemy I, later known as Soter or Savior. The Egyptians soon accepted the Ptolemies as the successors to the pharaohs of independent Egypt. Ptolemy's family ruled Egypt until the Roman conquest of 30 BC.
which is really weird situation if you think, because they colonized Egypt also. And so it's like
Greece. You mean? Is that what you said?
the Grecians colonized Egypt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it would be like if right now you'd have a white guy ruling India as a president, because they call, you know what I mean? Like, it's just weird. None of the population there is like it, but so that's what they had within. It's hard because you always think Ptolemy is Egyptian. No, they're Greek.
They're Greek.
They're all Greek. That's why Cleopatra is
Yeah.
Greek looking.
So,
It's Greece and then later on is Rome.
so Ptolemy's family ruled Egypt until the Roman conquest in 30 BC. And that would be where you had the death of the king of the south back in that history. So then you have just the king of the north. Is that right? Because there's a period of time in Daniel where it's just the activities of the king of the north, because the king of the south goes silent for a while. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And then the king of the south comes back in 1798. So like the earlier dynasties of ancient Egypt, the Ptolemaic dynasty practiced inbreeding, including sibling marriage, but this did not start in earnest until Arsinoe or Berenice. The most famous member of the line was the last queen, Cleopatra VII, known for her role in the Roman political battles between Julius Caesar and Pompey, and later between Octavian and Mark Antony. Her apparent suicide at the conquest by Rome marked the end of the Ptolemaic rule in Egypt. So this is the beginning of the king of the north and the king of the south in that verse, where you have Seleucus, the first one, and then you have Ptolemy, first one here. So it's taking this history from a certain perspective, that perspective, the death of Alexander to the death of Antigonus, and the history of the thread that Daniel is pulling is giving just enough history to explain the background of two people. He only goes to the fourth as an introduction to the two, and the two he is considering is Seleucus and Ptolemy. So he goes to the four generals and then goes straight to the two. So you have, for a short period of time, wasn't it like 3 years, I think it was? Was it just 3 years, I think? Where you have the four, and then you have three, and then you have two. So the whole story of Daniel 11 then is going to be the king of the north versus the king of the south. King of the south is going to be killed off and not come back until 1798.
What page are we on?
28. Oh, I don't know on those notes. I don't know, because those are different. In 2016, Daniel 11 was opened up, and with it, our understanding of Raphia and Panium. So somebody want to read these verses here?
And the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north, and shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. So the king of the north shall come, and cast up a mountain, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand.
So that's the death, actually, of the king of the south. And we know that that's Panium as well, what she just read.
It sounds like the
Spheres of
arms.
influence there, too.
Yeah, the arms are spears, aren't they?
I think so.
It's not the body, it's not the head, it's the arms. So the
Yeah.
arms can't, though.
Because
yeah.
he's taking the most fenced cities. That's you're talking about. They're taking more territories away.
Yeah.
So the king of the south loses territories, loses spheres of influence, and the king of the south goes off the scene, dead until 1798, and rises up in a new form. So in between, we have some more details. He starts to introduce Rome, and that was verse 14, which we didn't read. Different concepts, but you look at the theme of these verses, and we won't go all through Daniel 11 because that's been done many times since 2016. But these verses are what gives us Raphia and Panium. In verse 11, we have the Battle of Raphia, and this is where the king of the south comes against the king of the north. We identified that in the history of Pyrrhus as Asculum. So in verse 11, this is Raphia, which we overlaid with Asculum. And verses 13 and 14 is the history of Seleucus and Ptolemy. By this stage, they have different kings. By the time you get to Panium, they're ancestors of the original that we just went through. So by this stage, they have different kings, different names, and I just want to refer to them as Seleucus and Ptolemy to keep it simple. The Seleucid Empire or the Ptolemaic Empire. So in verse 11, we have the Battle of Raphia, and it's understanding these verses in 2016 that we realize that the king of the south was not finished in our history. So these are the ones that followed that she's referring to here. Ptolemy IV, or Philopator, if that's how you say that. Let's see. It means lover of his father, son of Ptolemy III and Berenice II, was the fourth pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt from 221 to 204 BC. Ptolemy's succession to the throne was accompanied by a wide-ranging purge of Ptolemaic royal family, which left control of the realm's government largely in the hands of his courtiers, Sosibius and Agathocles. His reign was marked by the Fourth Syrian War, and these wars become important. They'll be up here in the next couple of slides, with the Seleucid Empire, which culminated in a decisive Ptolemaic victory at the Battle of Raphia, one of the largest battles of the whole Hellenistic age. In the final years of his rule, control over the southern portion of the country was lost to the rebel pharaoh.
Because do you remember the king at Panium, that the king at Raphia was the vicious king, right? The Ptolemy Philopator, the one we just talked about. And he messed up his whole system there. Like he was really like a Nero type, not 100% smart in the brain. He gave all the most like wealth and stuff to the most ridiculous in his, empire and all of this. And so everything fell apart when he died. So Agathocles took over because the next king was 5 years old. That's the one who fights in Panium, I think. I'm pretty sure if I remember right.
We'll see, because we got the Battle of
Yeah.
Panium we're going to read next. So Ptolemy IV died in mysterious circumstances in 204 BC and was succeeded by his young son, Ptolemy V, Epiphanes, that's the one you're just bringing up, under the regency of Sosius and
Agathocles.
In ancient sources, Ptolemy was criticized for being more interested in luxury, which is what you just said, and court ceremony than government, politics, and foreign relations. The decline of the Ptolemaic dynasty is usually traced to his realm.
You know what I noticed, that most kings or monarchy, or whenever they're like more focused on the luxury and court ceremony and all of that extravaganza and poetry and all that kind of stuff, their government usually goes the most craziest, and they get the most money hungry and like mad, crazy. Yeah, they do. I've noticed that in almost every movie I've watched about the rulers in Rome and all of that kind of stuff. Whenever they started getting all like into all of that weird stuff, and like extravagance and having people come and dance and doing all that exotic orgies and all that kind of stuff, then that's when, and then everything else is going downhill within the, the regular common people and stuff, and they having uproars and everything like that, it's really interesting. And then most of them get assassinated, but or something happens, but it's pretty crazy.
Bless you. So then we have the Battle of Panium, also known as Panion, ancient Greek, was fought in 200 BC near Paneas, which is Caesarea Philippi, between Seleucid and Ptolemaic forces as part of the 5th Syrian War. So Panium is part of the 5th Syrian War. The Seleucids were led by Antiochus III the Great, while the Ptolemaic army was led by Scopas of Aetolia. The Seleucids achieved a complete victory, annihilating the Ptolemaic army and conquering the province of Coal Syria. The Ptolemaic kingdom never recovered from its defeat at Panium, so the king of the south is dead, and ceased to be an independent great power. So no longer are you a world superpower. Antiochus secured his southern flank and began to concentrate on the looming conflict with the Roman Republic. Antiochus the Younger, the firstborn son of Antiochus III, commanded the elite cataphracts of the Seleucid army and seized Tel Hamra, a foothill of Mount Hermon in the right. The cataphracts opened the battle by attacking and quickly routing the hapless Ptolemaic cavalry under Ptolemy. In the center, the Ptolemaic phalanx forced back their Seleucid counterparts. The Seleucid elephants neutralized this Ptolemaic success by charging through the gaps in the Seleucid phalanx and halting their advance. The cataphracts, Ptolemaic success, the cataphracts under Antiochus the Younger ended their pursuit of the enemy cavalry and charged the rear of the Ptolemaic phalanx. Phalanx, what? Phalanx, thank you.
It's like another word for extremity or something. It's just a group of the part of the army.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pressed from two sides by war elephants, phalangites, and cataphracts, the relatively immobile Ptolemaic phalanx was annihilated in place. Scopas, situated on the right wing, fled the field, taking 10,000 troops with him. So that would be where it's talking about coming with many more. Oh, I don't have it in front of me anymore to read it, but that's verse 12, I believe. No, that's Panium, so that's verse 15. So we want to look at Ipsus from another perspective. This perspective is one of the first perspective here we looked at was one with Demetrius and Pyrrhus. And when Acts 27 brought us here, we were able to identify Demetrius as the king of the north and Pyrrhus as the king of the south. And that's the one that we had been looking at. But if we were to go to Daniel 11 and look at this history, who is the king of the north and the king of the south? It's not Demetrius or Pyrrhus. It's telling the story of Seleucus, the king of the north, and Ptolemy, the king of the south. So Daniel 11 is telling looking at Daniel 11 verses 11 and 12. You're looking at now going into Seleucus and Ptolemy. So we're going to look at Ipsus from this perspective. And it took me a long time to try to juggle this in my mind, but this is what was going on while you actually had the Battle of Ipsus. If we remember that Seleucus comes in with the elephants, it's against the three allies, and Seleucus comes in with the elephants, and he divides the army of Demetrius and Antigonus winds up dying in battle. But this is going to tell us the story of Ptolemy and Seleucus, the same Seleucus, but Ptolemy during this time, because remember, Ptolemy didn't go to that battle. So just like we're all learning how to juggle all these different concepts, we're going to juggle two different things happening at the same time. So if we were to study Raphia, we would find that this is a war between Seleucus and Ptolemy. And the context of this chapter for many of these verses, really from verse 4 forward, they're tracing the relationship between these two empires. This is the history of the Syrian wars. There's 6 of them. The end of the fourth takes us to 217 BC and the Battle of Raphia. So this is the end of 4 Syrian wars. And where does this story begin? Where does Daniel begin this story? In verse 4 with the Battle of Ipsus. So you've got verse 4, the Battle of Ipsus is going to take us through these wars that come about. I'll keep reading. So I need to make sure I get it straight too. So in verse 4 with the Battle of Ipsus, we discussed Raphia. We can discuss Panium. What Daniel 11 does not tell us is why they are fighting. Because when we come to Ipsus, what is the relationship between Seleucus and Ptolemy? They're allies. You had the 4 allies, but only 3 of them were in the battle. Ptolemy didn't show up at the battle, so they're allies at Ipsus. So Seleucus and Ptolemy are allies at Ipsus. Here's my map, and there's Ipsus. Is that Turkey?
No.
I thought Turkey was more over here, because that's Armenia. Isn't that where Turkey is, over in here?
This whole area is Turkey.
That all is Turkey? Okay. Somebody talking?
Someone's talking.
It's really low though.
Yeah.
You have the sea.
So it is Turkey here?
Up here.
I think that was Sister Donna, but I'm not
Okay.
sure.
No, it has to be
Who's that?
higher.
Mom,
Yeah, it's Turkey.
this is the Black Sea.
Oh, okay.
This is Thracia, Romania.
Okay.
This is Turkey.
Okay. For some reason or other, I thought it was more over this way.
No, and this whole area was Antigonus's empire until Seleucus took his part of it.
Okay.
But for a time at the Sonder Law, it's like Antigonus is here and Seleucus is here. And so they both have these huge empires right by each other.
Okay. So we'll describe a little bit of what happened between these two at this point in time. Looking at the map, we see Egypt in the south. Here's the Ptolemaic Empire. Ptolemy, as he expanded his empire in these wars, he tended to expand it up through the region, through Palestine, to an area which is of great strategic importance called Coal Syria. And this particular map doesn't identify Coal Syria, but I put circles roughly where they were.
Syria is underneath where Coal Syria is, and then Turkey.
It just disappeared. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, so let's see, to an area, a strategic area called Coal Syria. Do I have my circle in the right place for Coal Syria? That's about where it was, because Damascus, right?
It goes all the way down lower.
Okay, I didn't go as far.
I'm pretty sure. Because this is
They can't see what you're doing, so you can put it,
Gaza is part of Coal Syria.
Gaza's part, okay,
Yeah.
That's what
Egypt,
Coal Syria is.
the border of Egypt is here.
okay,
So when Antigonus came and took the whole of Coal Syria, it went all the way to here.
okay. Whoops. Okay. Did you guys follow that?
I think you have to do it with the.
How did you go back with one click?
There's an arrow down here.
Okay, I was just
But
wondering because
sometimes the
last
arrow
time
doesn't
you.
show.
Oh,
Can't you just go
okay.
get one of those writing thingies from the Zoom chat and circle that area? I'm pretty sure you can do that, can't you?
I got it circled.
The whole area.
Oh, the whole area. I'm not gonna mess with it now.
Okay.
You don't want me to try to learn something in front of everybody. We'll drag on forever. Okay, so there's the Mediterranean. We have the Mediterranean here and the Battle of Ipsus up here. All of this territory, Col Sierra up through this area here, had all been part of Antigonus's empire. And that's what she was just saying. All this was part of Antigonus's empire. And these three, Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus, defeated him. So this is all Antigonus's area, and the three allies defeated him. Remember, Ptolemy wasn't at the battle.
I could show you how to, it's really easy.
That's okay.
Okay.
I can adjust my slide later.
Next time.
You can do it yourself if you want.
Yeah.
I
go
think you
back real
can while
quick.
it's even
Oh,
on
look
shared
at-
screen.
Yeah.
I think you could do it yourself.
There. Oh,
There,
it's up there.
Yeah,
Yeah, that whole,
yeah, yeah.
this whole region. Okay. How do I erase it? Oh, there it
It's
is.
not gonna matter anyways. It's not gonna show up on the slide.
Okay.
Okay, so we already said that Ptolemy didn't turn up to this battle, but he had traditionally in his past history also been able to win this area, Egypt to Col Syria. When Antigonus is defeated, because remember the three allies, Seleucus comes in at the last with the elephants, divides them, and Antigonus is defeated, and they're going to divide up things. When Antigonus is defeated, these three generals take Antigonus's empire and divide it between themselves. Seleucus is east of Col Syria, and Seleucus was given control of Col Syria. Before Seleucus can take this country, Ptolemy rushed up and took control of the region. So it was given to, in the division after Antigonus's death, it's given to Seleucus, but before Seleucus can take it, Ptolemy comes up and takes it. So as verse 5 of Daniel 11 showed us, these two were close allies, closer than any other general. Seleucus had been one of Ptolemy's generals, which it describes in the verse as one of his princes. You go back and read that verse. I don't remember if we read that particular verse. I think it was. So Seleucus is the one that's titled in that verse, one of his princes. That's Seleucus. So it's Ptolemy, and they were all Alexander's generals. So at the beginning of their relationship, Seleucus and Ptolemy, the king of the north and the king of the south, are
Where
in
are
an
you?
alliance. Huh?
So where are you?
I just finished it.
Oh,
Cuando
I see.
Question from somebody?
That's Sister Maroni.
Porque me-
She doesn't have her mic
Okay.
muted.
So we've already said that Ipsus is the 2016 election. When we went to our first perspective, the king of the north and the king of the south are in an alliance. But I also want us to see that right in the chapter of Daniel 11, discussing this king of the north and king of the south, Seleucus and Ptolemy, that Daniel is building the exact same structure that the north and south are in alliance. And when he takes Ipsus as a
And then
cause,
he takes.
huh?
And then he takes.
And then he takes Ipsus as a cause. There's 4 Syrian wars. We're going to do the same thing as Daniel and call them noise. So Daniel called the 22 years noise, and we're going to call this history as well noise. You go from Ipsus, cause, to the effect, Raphia.
Okay,
And
so
they're in an
what is-
alliance here at Ipsus.
I get it. What is her purpose of calling that noise?
Because Daniel wrote about those wars.
I know,
Yeah.
but no, she.
We're-
Oh,
we're not going to focus on them.
oh
like
yeah,
Daniel
but we're
did.
gonna focus on
Yeah.
the 22. I got it. Okay. All right.
So
And it's
there's 4 Syrian wars.
Sister Elaine.
Somebody trying to talk again?
Sister Marioni, were you trying to say something?
No, I just said Daniel skipped those wars.
No, not these. These Syrian wars he talked about. It was the Diadochi wars that Daniel skipped.
Oh, okay.
So Daniel skips the Diadochi wars and goes straight to Ipsus and then talks about Syrian War 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. He doesn't really go into Syrian War number 6. But we're going to
Oh.
skip Syrian War 1, 2, 3, and we're going to go to 4, which is Raphia.
So he skipped the Diadochi Wars, 22 years, and we're skipping the Syrian Wars,
Just a few of them. There's like 6.
just a few of them. So, so there's there's 6 total, but there's 4 Syrian wars in between here. We're going to do the same thing as Daniel and call them noise, cause and effect. Ipsus was the cause for all the Syrian wars. When Ptolemy took whole Syria area, this sparked not straight away, but soon into the future, their children started fighting. So at Ipsus, you had the first Seleucus that we just went through in Ptolemy, and it was the children later that actually were fighting. So when Ptolemy took whole Syria area, this sparked not straight away, but soon into the future, their children started fighting because Seleucus' son said, my father was given that territory, and for you to take it was illegal. And so over this situation, they fight these 6 Syrian wars.
I just felt it's so just dumb, really. Like, why couldn't you just let it be? Like, dang, why do you have to fight over it? Why can't it just be peace?
I know,
I don't
it's
know.
amazing, isn't it?
It's the fight over the land.
I know,
The
but why couldn't
property.
you just
Well,
exactly why
Because
would
of
you just let it
resources.
be?
yeah, you
But
can
remember-
strategically placed because of the resources,
Yeah,
because it's going to
remember
tell us
in the
what the
time
Syrian
of
wars mean.
Israel.
Oh, yeah.
That whole area of whole Assyria was really vibrant and green and full of all kinds of resources. So they kept fighting over control over that area.
I know, but if you keep giving up, then later on you're left with nothing.
Yeah.
So people,
Yeah.
people
Well, I would
step
just-
on you and do whatever when you.
Well, when you look at when you look at Abraham and look at them, what they did, they just went somewhere else, and God allowed them to prosper. So
But that's because they
I
had
know.
I
God.
know. I'm just,
When they took Canaan and the land was divided, everybody was supposed to stay with their piece of land and not give it away, remember? It was part of the family property that you have to, take it back in the 50th year or whatever, if you sold a piece or whatever you did. You have to take back that piece of land in the family.
well, I just think about Isaac and those wells, because when they kept getting mad that he was digging up those wells, or like he was having all of those, like, remember he was digging up the wells. and then-
Abimelech, I think
Yeah.
it was. with
Yeah, and
Abimelech.
they got mad,
That
and
was
so
the time when they were strangers.
yeah,
in the
yeah,
land. But when they got out of Egypt and now they possess the land, is theirs.
They were, God told them, you have to go fight and destroy every
Yeah.
person on that land and take it from them.
yeah,
That wasn't peace.
yeah.
Which was actually where Abraham and Isaac and Jacob lived before.
Yeah,
But before
yeah.
they were strangers.
Yeah.
When they came back, they owned the land.
Right. Wow. I
So
don't know.
the reason this is important for later studies is these Syrian wars, because you have the Syrian wars that are taking place now that began in Arab Spring, I think it was in 2011. And so you have Syrian wars, and the whole thing that set that off was with Obama wanting to, trying to think of the right way to say
Get
it.
the oil.
Yeah, they wanted to have more
Yeah,
control
the
over
oil.
European oil and not have them, they wanted Europe to be less dependent on Russia, because Russia, if they controlled the oil, they can control Europe. And so Syria, this area here, is a passageway that they were not allowed to go through to get oil through. So that's what this battle over that area still is. That battle has always been over that area.
Yeah.
And it's the king of the north against the king of the south, with that area right in the middle.
Wow. That's
And tells who's the superpower is.
Who controls that area? And same thing as today.
Yeah. Nothing changed.
So again, in chapter 11, Daniel cuts out the parts he doesn't want to include, the parts that he says are noise, and by noise, they aren't building the parable he wants us to see. He doesn't even include the 6th Syrian war in Daniel 11. There's no record of it. So Daniel took the death of Alexander, skipped 4 Diadochi wars, and took us to the death of Antigonus. Cause and effect. We're taking the 4 Syrian wars, the Battle of Ipsus, skipping those 4 wars, calling them noise. Ipsus is 301 BC, is the cause of the conflict. Raphia, 217 BC, is the effect. Ipsus is 2016, and Raphia, 217 BC, is 2019. So the 4 Diadochi Wars, Daniel skips this 22 years and calls it noise, and he goes from cause to effect, from where there were many generals down to where there's 4 generals. The 6 Syrian wars, you have the 4 generals, and you're going to go down to get to the focus of Ptolemy and Seleucus. So if we look at Ipsus from this perspective, we have Antigonus, and he is being opposed by Seleucus. Antigonus, remember, Antigonus is the one that comes in with the elephants, right? The 3, and Seleucus, Cassander, and Lysimachus. And Cassander and Lysimachus were there at first, and Seleucus comes from the east with unexpectedly, it says, with the elephants. So it's the same history, it's just looking at it a different way. So we have Antigonus, and he's opposed by Seleucus. And who killed him? Antigonus is Clinton. So let's see, who killed Seleucus? Who killed Antigonus? Antigonus is Clinton. So now, who is Seleucus from this perspective? Demetrius is the king of the north in the parable, and the other one that we're looking at. But in Daniel's parable, who is the king of the north? Donald Trump. And who killed Antigonus with a new mode of warfare? Seleucus did, with 400 to 500 elephants. Who's supporting the king of the north that doesn't turn up in the battle that is part of this alliance? And that was Ptolemy. Who is supporting the king of the north? So the king of the south, Ptolemy, is supporting the king of the north, Seleucus, in this battle. So even if we want to go to Daniel 11 and consider Seleucus and Ptolemy, they begin in an alliance before they ever get to Raphia. And that alliance again takes us back to the same battle.
To the Battle of Ipsus, right?
So the other,
To the Battle of Ipsus. It takes us back to the Battle of Ipsus.
Yeah. So in the previous perspective, you have Demetrius as Trump and Pyrrhus as Putin, right? And you have the king of the, so you have the king of the north and the king of the south as Demetrius and Pyrrhus. But Antigonus is there, and that's where Antigonus dies. Antigonus.
The only thing that stays the same in both is Antigonus is Hillary.
Is what?
Hillary.
Yeah.
So she's
Can we say it from the beginning, because with all this bouncing, it's making me confused. Sorry.
So you can look at it as west and east perspective, because on the west side of things, when you look at it here, you had Antigonus, Demetrius, and Pyrrhus, because Pyrrhus is from over here. Okay, Hillary, Trump, and Putin. So they're fighting all of them against the 3 allies. But then you look at it from this perspective, you have Seleucus and Ptolemy against Hillary. So you have Trump and Putin against Hillary this way.
And I think I have a slide coming up that shows them all.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I mean, I got it. I think we went through this, but
we did before, but
but when you have so much,
it's a lot.
Then it kind of, I just need order. Yeah.
It's actually very helpful for me to do this the second time, because it's helping it stick a little bit more. So when we see how Daniel structures history, and he skips 4 wars, he calls them noise, details that are not relevant to his parable. So he skips them, goes to the death of Alexander, 323 BC, from the death of Alexander to the death of Antigonus, 301, which is Ipsus, cause and effect, and skips 22 years. We're doing the same thing, taking that exact same pattern or structure. We see the Battle of Raphia, this war, it's only an effect. We want to trace it back to its cause, which is the same Battle of Ipsus.
So wait, Raphia is the effect of Ipsus.
Ipsus.
Okay. And
Raphia
Ipsus is the cause, and then Raphia is the effect.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So we have to skip 4 Syrian wars and go to the end of the 4th, which is the Battle of Raphia. At the beginning, we find an alliance between the king of the north and the king of the south. That alliance does is destroy the last hope of the empire of Greece.
So the cause being the alliance, right? Mm-hmm. And then the effect is what comes out of that alliance.
to destroy the last hope of the Empire of Greece, to destroy the last hope of the establishment.
Exactly. That's what I was.
Mhm.
That's the effect
To
of
destroy-
that alliance.
Right.
That makes sense.
The last hope of the establishment. The last person that could have made it great again,
Okay, please.
the last person who stood with the likes of George Washington and those who framed the Constitution. They rejected a constitutional lawyer. They rejected Clinton. They have to remember, or rather, we are required to go back into the history of 2016 and consider what choices the world made, not just the United States, but across the world. When we come to the history of 2016, it's not just this movement that is forced to make choices. This became a worldwide choice, whether we voted or not, what we thought either party represented. So whatever
That
you
is
think they
so
represent.
interesting.
All of this affects the entire world in the end.
Yeah. So interesting. It makes me think
That's an amazing thing when you think about, okay, the death of the United States, right?
yeah.
So Donald Trump comes in and he's the death of the country, right? But Donald Trump has a whole lot more upon him than just the death of the United States. He brings on the destruction here at the end. He's going to bring back on the papacy, but
But it's just really
with the
interesting.
death of the United States, that's
Yeah, that's horrible.
over.
Yeah, that's horrible. And people know it and people see it. And you know, I just think about every election because I never voted, and I was like, I love that Ellen G. White said don't get involved in politics because it was my excuse that hey, I didn't have to care about what was going on in politics.
right.
You know, but my dad, he was heavily into politics, and he, you know, but he wasn't Republican or Democrat, he was a libertarian, but you know, it's just really interesting, you know, because he would say vote, and he voted, you know, and he voted for president. And so, but he didn't vote for, he voted, I think, during the time that Obama, it was Ron Paul also in the thing, and he voted for Ron Paul. But, you know, it was just really interesting that all this was going on. And I had my thoughts and everything, but I really didn't care because
Yeah.
I was like, this is just, you
Yeah.
know,
I
I
read
wasn't into
all those
politics.
quotes too.
I wasn't
and,
into politics.
I've read all those quotes too.
Yeah.
And there comes a point, there would have to have come a point in time where you do have to know about politics.
Yeah.
Because the Sunday law comes in through that avenue.
And then when you go back into history, it does make it like, why didn't I want to be? You know, because of all of that fight, that suffrage, all of that, you know, for us to even have that right, for this to even be America, you know, the consent of the governed. And if you didn't have your consent in anything, then what's the point? You know, like
There's a quote that John put in the WhatsApp about a political, Ellen White statement on political stuff.
They were asking questions, yeah, he was.
But I mean, if you think about it, there's a difference between knowing what's going on in the world around you and being one of those people who at every family get together, you're constantly arguing about political leaders. Do you know what I mean?
The focus of your mind.
And it's not from a God or biblical perspective or a prophetic
you're
perspective.
this side or that side, and that's what you're fighting for.
And you're wanting to be, you're divisive, and it's just causing division in a time when there shouldn't be any. You know, it's not the time where that should be a test.
And we need to see it from its prophetic view of what is happening.
Yeah, but it wasn't, and speaking from my home, it wasn't like that. It was more like get involved. And he wanted us to be like knowing, like have a world view, you know, be well-rounded, you know, and everything. So are you about to sneeze?
No, it's yawning.
Okay.
Okay. So keep me talking and I don't yawn. So on one side,
Okay.
Somebody gonna say something?
Yeah, can I ask a question? Okay, now that we know there's a lot of conspiracy theories, can we vote?
I wouldn't do that until we get a understanding on it.
Yeah, I would. That's my own self too. That I would rather make sure that, because I feel inadequate to fully understand. And how do I explain this? I don't want to make a wrong choice. I want to make sure that I understand the candidates, what they stand for, and what perspective they have. Because it seems like the logical thing to do is everybody go participate in voting for the Democrat, just so that he has less votes. So we definitely have to have some understanding and wisdom on that.
Exactly, but that actually is a part of being a consent, a person, a civil. What am I trying to say? A person in America, because you need to be educated on those things before you even vote.
We're in this mess because people voted on feelings and emotions and what I want.
Yeah.
What I want, not what's good for everybody, but what I want.
Yeah.
And we're in this mess because of reckless voting, reckless decision making.
And you need to be educated to make those proper decisions.
So on one side, you have apostate Protestantism, and then just a quick note on the last study, and we may have corrected it last study, I don't remember. So I put this in there. She's making the correction that Steve Bannon is a very strong Catholic and not apostate Protestant. He's Catholic. So I don't remember if we had that corrected in last week's study or not. So the rejection of the leadership, it was 2012, but Steve Bannon, Fox News, rejection of the leadership, talking about the leadership of this movement, was in 2012 when the Message of Time opened up in the UK. And we went through that, I think, on last week's study as well. So, but Steve Bannon, Fox News, a large part of apostate Protestantism did not like what they saw in Obama or Clinton. And they think that their savior is Donald Trump. And many of them are willing to say that he's raised up of God to save and restore the nation. Some of them even go to a prophetic level of in Isaiah 46, and they call him Cyrus. And it doesn't matter what he does. Cyrus wasn't a godly man. They don't care because they think that their country needs, what their country needs is to go back to that same apostate Protestant way of thinking, which means you oppose gay marriage, you fight against immorality, you recognize and protect Christianity, and whether you like to talk about it or not, usually not, we don't like a woman in leadership.
But how can you fight against immorality when the person who is you're supposed to be savior against it isn't immoral? I mean, is immoral himself, or just has no morals?
That is very hypocritical because they're saying we're fighting against the immorality of these leaders, but then here's the one who's immoral of all.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, well, we don't care about the morals. We just want to get our laws.
And that's what
in that video, he points out that Franklin Graham pointed out at the Super Bowl with J-Lo in her attire,
her butt,
and how then he goes on and he's praising Donald Trump at this prayer breakfast.
Yeah.
So that's hypocritical what they're fighting against, and they're talking about recognize to protect Christianity. No, they're not to protect Christianity. They're to protect liberty, right?
Yeah.
The right to worship as you want. So this last point, though, that I want to make sure everybody catches, the one I bolded, is whether we like to talk about it or not. Usually not. We don't like a woman in leadership. People say that in the world, they say that in the world. They say that apostate Protestant churches, they say that in this movement. This, remember, I'm pretty sure it was March 2019. When did we learn about equality and women's rights and all of that?
That was after.
So was it brand new for her to understand?
It was August, September.
She said that in March.
What did she say?
That whether we like to talk about it or not, usually not, we don't like a woman in leadership. She says people in the world say that. They say that in apostate Protestant churches, and they say that in this movement.
Yeah, we were talking about women's equality before August, September, but it didn't get to the point where it was like, oh no, women can wear pants and be leadership now. And they're like, oh.
I think at that time there was still that woman's ordination thing, and that was in that Adventist church. I mean, even in the
but she's talking about even in the movement.
Exactly, even in the movement it was
standing
talking about
for women being in high places.
Yeah, but I think that because that was even still talked about at that, I think that was in 2015 where they were actually going to do that.
So I'm just pointing out that what she's saying here, what we've learned in recent months was not new.
Yeah,
They've known that for a while. They saw the direction it was heading.
Yeah.
And I think about that from my own perspective as well, is how slow we are to really catch things. And it's like, I see it in my life and how the Lord works. Is you learn something, you don't even know what it means. and then you go and have an experience, and that brings it all together, right? So these things were being said, and they were going over our heads. The reality of what it was going to come to, it was going over our heads and not really connecting what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She says this way back then.
But I think it was talk. I mean, the thought of even women being ordained,
that was
all of that was
the church
always,
was all against it.
Yeah. All of that was,
Yeah.
in the
Right.
in the air. I could
Right.
say it was in the air.
So I did put a link for those that can open the slide. Why Trump reigns as King Cyrus. It's a New York Times article. If you haven't read it, the link is there. So we need to ask ourselves some questions. When Obama introduced gay marriage, is that a violation of the Constitution or a fulfillment of what it requires? In 2016, what choice is the American public required to make? When people in this movement say that a woman should not be a boss or a leader or a position of leadership, then the American public had a difficult decision. In fact, then they had no choice. They either choose someone who stands with the ancestors, Clinton, who stands with the establishment, the ancestors, George Washington, the founders, with the founders of the Constitution, or they choose their harvest and their shut door. When we come to this movement, I think we need to go back into our own thinking. We're being called out of apostate Protestant way of thinking. How much of that work has been done? How much of it still needs to be done? The work of God's movement and of this message is to teach us. The problem God always has with his people is that we might be willing to learn, but how much are we willing to unlearn? And think about it, is when I was talking earlier about and I don't remember if we were connected when we did that, when I was talking about the sifting, that you go through, when you're putting flour through a sifter, imagine a sifter that has really large holes, and a lot more can get through it, but you continue to get through, go to the next finer and finer and finer sifter until next to nothing can get through. Well, with each thing you have to unlearn, what does that mean? It means you have to come to recognizing I was wrong, and you have to be able to be corrected. So how much are we willing to unlearn? There's a big difference between learning and unlearning. We could be willing to learn, and are we willing to unlearn? So we do like to learn, we want to learn, but part of this process is learning how wrong we've been. We've all been called out of apostate Protestant mindset. So many have, as had Moses, very much to unlearn in order to learn the very lessons that they need to learn. Moses had need to be self-trained by severest mental and moral discipline, and God wrought with him before he could be fitted to train others in mind and heart. He had been instructed in the Egyptian courts. Nothing was left as unnecessary to train him to become a general of armies. The false theories of the idolatrous Egyptians had been instilled into his mind, and the influences surrounding him and the things his eyes looked upon could not easily be shaken off or corrected. That's us. There's these things that are built into us that are not easily shaken off or corrected. Thus it is with many who have had false training in any line. All the idolatrous rubbish of heathen lore must be removed bit by bit.
That should be a praise to God, because we want to have those things out of us.
Right. Bit by bit, item by item, from Moses' mind. Jethro helped him in many things to a correct faith, as far as he himself understood. He was working upward toward the light, where he could see God in singleness of heart. God, Jehovah, was revealed to him. This thorough intellectual training in Egypt and as a shepherd among the mountains in the pure air made him a strong thinker and a strong doer of the word.
Wow. So this is, if people would just realize what's happening right now, like the rebuke that's going out is a huge blessing.
Amen.
You know,
It is.
this is like a last chance to get all
To
that.
whom I love, I chasten.
Exactly. Oh, if the people who are, but I mean, if you just realize, I mean, it hurts at first, it burns, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But afterwards, you're way happier than you were before, because
So
the
don't
other
just-
option is where you have heartbreak all day because you know what you just left behind. I mean, And the moment you leave, because Satan will delude you, and then you leave, and then the moment you look back, you're like, oh no, then you realize, because that's how messed up he is. He'll let you see what you just lost, and now you're stuck, and you can't do that. You can't go there.
So don't be just willing to learn. Be willing to be corrected.
Amen. 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 And what I think that is what keeps people in the truth and from falling away. You know what I'm saying? Because one, you need to be humble.
The sifter at the final stage.
Yeah.
And make it through.
God help me. But I'm just saying, to be humble enough to be corrected. I was always like, correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously if you're not wrong, what makes you think that you're going to continue all the way,
right.
On the right path, so you have to be humble enough to be told
Corrected.
You're wrong, to correct those mistakes, because who wouldn't want to be corrected? Sister Jackie says, actually, no, that was Brother Jonathan. Idolatrous rubbish. It's interesting. I think Parmenter tied idolatry into conservatism in Uganda. Our idolatry is our old conservative rubbish.
Yeah, because he was in one of the videos, and I thought this was really fascinating. He was saying that they teach for doctrines the doctrines of devils.
Mm-hmm.
They teach for how does that?
You're saying it right.
Go? Yeah, but they teach
they
that.
They teach the commandments of men as doctrines.
Oh no, that's not right.
That it's not. But they're basically trying to say this is the law of God, but really it's doctrine of devils.
Right.
And he's like, the reason why is because the Pharisees kept trying to explain all those things. So when you try to explain the law, Allah's there. Everyone is supposed to do their best to make application. You're supposed to strive with God to figure out whether your intentions are right or not. You're supposed to have that experience. But when you decide, oh, I'm lazy, I'll just have you tell me what to do. You put all the power in their hands, and now they're the ones making the laws and deciding what they mean. The moment you open your mouth and you say, well, if you need a car and God didn't say anything about a car. He didn't say anything about these weird situations. You're putting words in God's mouth. So these are your laws that you're now teaching. So they took those, and they took the moral laws because they didn't have any prophetic laws. They didn't understand the prophetic message. So that's all they had was that and the prophetic laws, and that's what they stuck to, to no end. And so they just turned it into an idolatrous ceremony, because if the heart's not in it, then it's idolatry.
Really interesting, because you have the same scenario going on in church and state, because the people just have let the government do what they want to do and stayed ignorant of what needs to go on. And then in the church, you have the same thing. You just want somebody else to take care of it. Teach me what I need to know, and tell me when I need to get up and be alarmed, and just, you know what I mean?
Partially, they're not all at fault with that, because in both systems, if you look to within America, people are being dumbed down.
Right.
They're not being educated like they should be. And it's a huge issue. It's talked about among all the educational systems that they're dumbing American children down, that they're not teaching them what they need to know. They're not educating them right to be successful on independent thinkers.
Right.
That, so with
and
that,
God has mercy on that, because he knows.
Amen. And so you can't blame people for putting everything into the hands of the government, because only if they knew, you know what I'm saying? Only if they were educated to know, the world would be a whole lot different. Just like the church would be a whole lot different. But the thing is that some people who do get educated and like on their own in their own studies and start seeing, hey, things aren't right here. Something's not right. And they don't have all the answers, because when they go to the people who they think should know and challenge them on these things, they get like, oh, be quiet. We don't want to hear, no, that's all wrong. You're way off there, come back with a different answer and I can help you out then. But,
not just that, anytime someone would be free thinking for themselves in the church, people would look at them like they're an apostate.
Yeah.
Because maybe they came up and realized, oh, that doesn't actually match what you're saying up there at that pulpit. Well, now you're in apostasy.
I know,
and that's happened in the
I know. I
movement
used
too.
to always say
Yeah.
that to Pastor White before all this happened. I'd say, because I would say stuff to him and I'd say stuff to Pastor Doug, and I said, I know, I'm a troubler of Israel, but you know what? This is what it says.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's what it says, and that's what they look at us as. Just like Ahab looked at Elijah as, you're the troubler of Israel. No, you're not the trouble. I'm not the troubler. You are the troubler of Israel because you keep the people in darkness.
Yeah, and I mean, there are some people who do have wacky stuff. I mean, conspiracies is a whole big thing,
Yeah.
and some people take it way too far.
Yeah, but
you know,
the thing
I
is,
know.
Elaine and I,
Ridiculous.
we were in the tape room many times. We got confronted with some crazy stuff. I still remember that guy with the, well,
calendar.
no, because this calendar and that calendar, and so it's not really Sabbath right now. Sabbath is yesterday, and because the times changed, and I'm looking at them like, you know, I think we're fine. It's nice meeting you.
Oh,
You know what I mean? But things would come along where you start to see, like, I don't know what it was, but you start to see, like, wow, this isn't just like, they're not just looking for truth. They're looking for something like wine. Like, they're addicted to this in a way that's like not godly. Like, you can tell when it goes over the edge and you're like, something's up here.
Yeah, exactly. Because it makes me think of this one guy who he's a friend of my friend, and so he would constantly just be talking about conspiracy theories and like how Beyonce baby is not her, that Jay-Z and Beyonce baby aren't theirs. It's actually
An alien.
no, not an alien. It's what's her Kelly. It's actually Kelly's Kelly is Beyonce's best friend. They were in Destiny Child group. Okay. So Kelly, you know, is actually Kelly's baby or something like that. That, hey, look at how come they look like this baby looks like this. It's just, why does that even matter? I mean, just on and on and on and on and on conspiracy theories, and it's just like, please, you know.
Let's close,
anyways.
wrap this study up anyway. You'll still have a few minutes but let's wrap this up with this quote. I thought it was pretty beautiful. Heaven will be cheap enough if we obtain it through suffering. We must deny self all along the way, die to self daily, let Jesus alone appear, and keep his glory continually in view. I saw that those who of late have embraced the truth would have to know what it is to suffer for Christ's sake, that they would have trials to pass through that would be keen and cutting, in order that they may be purified and fitted through suffering to receive the seal of the living God, pass through the time of trouble, see the King in his beauty, and dwell in his presence, in the presence of God and of pure holy angels.
That's what we have happening right now, the time of trouble, the little one.
Mm-hmm. As I saw,
and it's violent, and I don't think people think about that. That depicted in the Bible is a fight. You're fighting, and all night long.
Yeah.
So this whole, it's whatever is going on now, it's going to get much worse.
Yes. As I saw what we must be in order to inherit glory, and then saw how much Jesus had suffered to obtain for us so rich an inheritance, I prayed that we might be baptized into Christ's sufferings, that we might not shrink at trials, but bear them with patience and joy, knowing what Jesus had suffered, that we through his poverty and sufferings might be made rich. Said the angel, deny self, ye must step fast. Some of us have had time to get the truth and to advance step by step, and every step we have taken has given us strength to take the next. But now time is almost finished, and what we have been years in learning, they will have to learn in a few months. They will also have much to unlearn and much to learn again. Those who would not receive the mark of the beast in his image when the decree goes forth must have a decision now to say, nay, we will not regard the institution of the beast. I do have one more page, sorry. I think this is the last one. If we're to go back to the people of A.T. Jones, who stood for the Constitution, how many of us would be comfortable with what he stood for? Because we're required to know the Constitution and the separation of church and state. I think that's another area we need to be instructed in, because the idea that drives apostate Protestants, even the evangelical movement of the United States, is the idea to protect the Christianity of the nation. A.T. Jones says that the United States is not a Christian nation. It never has been a Christian nation. What exactly are they trying to enforce? We have a work of learning and a work of unlearning, and that is what prophecy is there to do for us.
Amen.
Not only give us security so we know what's happening externally, but it also needs to create an internal change in our own thinking and in the choices of our movement.
Amen.
So open it up for comments. Got a few minutes.
Be humble, humble, humble always is the main thing here.
Yeah, Sister Elaine just stepped out to use the restroom, but she'll be back. So we do have some time to chat a little bit if somebody wants to start a discussion, but
I just wonder where it's going to go from here, all the videos coming out. If this is a little increase in knowledge, can you imagine where it's going to go from here?
Sister Lana says, my mother often sends conspiracy theory videos about Putin isn't actually Putin, but it is his double. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of this is what I noticed a lot. Parmender has, from what he's been saying, he's like teaching us how to use our brains, because he's like, I don't give you the answers. He's teaching us to think for ourselves and be smart enough to figure things out. And it's hard, but it's like there's two sections. The moral one, you're supposed to be able to tangle with that and figure out how and what it means. And the prophetic one is God gives them those messages to teach to us. And so that's what we get from them. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, you have Sister Jack says to be tried and tested depending on the Lord. And Brother Jonathan says, my mom posted a meme making fun of Republicans today.
I'll take what I can get.
Yeah, I'll take what I can get. It's a start. And Lana says, people are waking up. Amen to that. Amen. People are waking up to that. Amen. I remember when I was watching the breakfast thing with my mom, and she was like, shouting at, like, get out of here, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So then, she says, well, my friend said that when Donald Trump gets out of there, then they're going to do him in good. I was like, no, Mom, Donald Trump is the last president. He's not leaving that office until Christ comes back. And then she was like, okay, Victoria, and so it's just really interesting, those moments where you do get to share truth with your family, like small things like that. And they're interested. I think some are more interested than we even really know, because when I'm sitting there watching the news or something, my family will come around me and like, what are you looking at? What are you watching? They observe me, they're watching me, what I do, what I say, and things like that. So it's really interesting to see what your family is saying about you and thinking about what you say. Like, I remember when my sister was like, well, what do you think? Because she said that you say that Donald Trump is going to be the last president and all of this kind of stuff. And then the impeachment started coming up. I said, well, yeah, he was impeached, but he's still going to be acquitted by the Senate. And then, all these different things where you can actually, say a word, and then they look at these things going on and they hear what you say. And it's like, whoa, they may not jump, into, the wagon and following along with the truth, but they'll see these little things that you said and that you do, and it's really actually helping them, hopefully to make the right choice when that day comes for them. But
so that's all I have. If anybody has anything more. How are we feeling on understanding Ipsus? I know I still have pieces that I'm trying to put it all together and juggle it all together in our
Wow.
all these concepts to juggle them all together.
Well, what do you
Yeah,
guys
Sister
have?
Lana says it really could mean that we will see Jesus within the next
Oh, yeah.
5 to 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's really interesting when you think about how, when Christ will actually come.
Because the last king, he only comes and he's just for a short space,
Yeah.
however short a space that is.
Mhm.
And the 10 kings give their power over to the beast,
But it
the
always,
first beast.
yeah, it always makes me think of that movie Time Changer, because at the end of that movie, and he's doing that thing, but anyways, that's a different side note. But they're giving the years and every time I
Where
saw
did it
that
end?
movie,
I can't remember. Where did it
I
end?
think it ended
20-something?
it was in the 20-something.
Yeah,
It was
I
in the
remember that
20
too.
something. I know. I was like, well, because you never know. Because sometimes, things, are in front of your face, and I don't know. I don't look at that, but I'm just saying.
Well, I always looked at years ago when I did that program where I don't know how I paid $1,800 a month for my house payment all those years. I do not know how I did. I mean, my business was stronger at that time, but I was just so tired of trying to always make the ends meet. You know what I mean? I was so tired. I was working all the time, and I was looking at I think it was an Obama program about getting your interest rate lowered, and I'd heard many stories about how hard that was and everything. Anyway, so I left it alone for a long time, and then I went ahead and tried it through my bank and prayed about it. I got to remember because I was going there for a reason based on what you said. And I lost my train of thought. But
And the 20-something.
the 20-something, yeah. So they didn't give. Thank you. They didn't give me the paperwork to show me, because of the way the program was written. It's not like I got to see the beginning from the end, and I didn't get to see where the interest rate would end. They kept telling me every step of the way, you have to wait until you go to sign the final papers. Well, I'm not like that. I don't want to sign the final papers. I want to know now. You know what I mean? So I was always wrestling with that, and then through much prayer. And it's a longer story that I'm trying to sum it up to, but I had remembered reading and knowing, we all know that Ellen White talks about it being 4,000 years from the time of Christ, but I guess there's a quote that'll take 4,000 years from the birth. But I was taking this quote that I knew about 4,000 years from the time of Christ, and I knew that he died in 31, right? 31 AD. So I knew 2,000. You got 4,000 years on one side, you got 2,000 on the other, so you got 2031. He's not in, so I signed those papers and said, I don't care, I'm not going to be here then. So I've always had it in my mind, definitely before 2031.
Yeah, me too.
It'd have to. So.
Sister Lana had something in the chat, but I can't see. She put, did you guys see there is a new movie that came out, Messiah, on Netflix?
I saw it there, but I didn't watch it. I kind of thought it was probably going to be odd. I didn't look into it.
Yeah, it looks like some kind of, it's not something that I would recommend to watch, but I'm just saying that, the world is already, what they are exploring is why people are attracted, to people like Putin or Hitler. Because if you actually, or Stalin, my grandmother, when she died at her deathbed in 2006, she was regretting why, she wished that Stalin was here to establish she was saying that, to set an order in our country. And people are attracted to this kind of, like Trump-like personalities, and not that, I don't know what kind of movie, I haven't watched it. I haven't even watched the trailer, but I just read the, what the movie is what was the goals of the movie. But I'm just saying that people, even the world knows that it's something about to happen, something so huge, like second coming of some kind of Messiah, and that's not a second coming, but Messiah. We all know that there's going to be some kind of impersonation, and I'm not even sure, is that really true? I mean, sometimes I wonder, is that something that's really going to happen?
We just
Why wouldn't it?
I mean, you know, the demonic impersonation and
It's Satan's
imitation.
last chance to deceive everyone, and the way things are going, this is coming up to be exactly how Ellen White predicted it would be with the papacy coming in. So for the papacy to be endorsed basically, and to say everything they did was right, you're going to have an antichrist, but it's going to be in the, from what we read, the same dispensation as Christ's second coming. He's just going to try to do it before.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so I'm thinking that people have this, you know, well, not all people, but there are people who can, you know, are exploring kind of ideas. Not that I'm, you know, I don't think we should watch this kind of movie, but I'm just saying.
There's a lot of distractions out there. You know how my journey began? In 2003, when I got my first Bible and wanted to read, I had no direction other than to just read. So I began at Genesis, and I don't remember how far I got through, but it was in 2003. I had to go back and look this up, but it was in 2003 when The Passion of the Christ came out. And so I was reading, and like I said, I don't remember how far I got, but what little I knew, I did know that the book was going to be about the Gospels. I didn't know anything about the Gospels either, but I thought, well, let me go watch the movie. Because then when I read, I'm going to get a little bit more as I go through this, right? So Jesse and I went and saw The Passion of the Christ. I would never go see that movie again now, but that was back in, before I knew anything.
Yeah.
But so that's where, it's all been headed that direction, to point you to the wrong direction. Was somebody going to say something?
No, there's a lot of background. I think someone
Sounds like a lot of children.
Well, we're going to pray and break for lunch, and maybe we can get Jonathan to close in prayer. Did he hear me? Jonathan, are you able to?
Yeah, sorry, I had my mic muted.
Good.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for for this gathering. Always, we thank you for the Sabbath and the blessings of all the conversation that we're able to have, Lord. Lord, we ponder this great light that is being poured out upon us, and we really desire, Lord, that we would be able to fully understand it as our time goes by and as we approach our progressive waymarks, Lord. I pray for each person here, Lord, that we will have an increase of knowledge on the current subjects, and I pray that we'll have a great understanding of it, Lord. Please bless each one here, bless the food, and please bless the hands that have prepared it. And I pray, Lord willing, that we will return back to continue our studies this Sabbath. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.